Professor Christina Pagel, who is a mathematician at UCL, her research is now in essentially the interface between maths and operational research and health data. So she works very closely with all of our hospital partners at UCL. She's also director of the Clinical Operational Research Unit and is one of the members of Independent SAGE. So many of you may have seen her through that setting and in the media in the last few months. Over to you, Christina.
I'm also working with you on Chimera.
Yes, that's true. We also work very closely together and have a joint centre on modelling, learning physiological models of intensive care patients.
Right, well, let me share my screen. So I hope you can all see that. So this is really a talk about failing, not failing, trying, learning. So, as Becky said, I'm a professor of operational research at UCL, which is a really applied branch of mathematics. And the whole point of operational research is that you're driven by the problem you're trying to solve and not by the methods. So that's kind of what I do, but I didn't get here in any particular linear way. So I'm just kind of go through kind of highlighting places where I have failed and what I took from that. And also just thinking about why I've done certain things in my life. It's not going to be quite as confessional as that sounds, but the first thing I failed at was academia. So at school, when I was maybe 13, 14, I got really into science, mainly because of my big brother. And I really, by the time I was 15, all I wanted to do was be a physicist. And I would write about it in my diary. And God, I was a complete nerd. I loved it. I was good at it. I went to Oxford. I studied maths. It made perfect sense at the time. I got a first, all good. And I decided to go and do a master's in quantum theory. And then I left. And I left because there weren't that many people on my course. I was the only woman. I was taught by men. They were all a bit odd, to be honest, not particularly encouraging. I remember going to an exam with the guy who was doing the course with me, and he was called Ingo. And he said to me, God, don't you wish the exams were like 6 hours long, that we had no idea what was in them? And I was like, Jesus Christ, no, I don't want that. I want exams to be easy and that I've prepared for and that I can get a good mark in. I mean, and I just thought, if this is what it means to be an academic scientist, then it's not for me. And I just felt like I don't fit in with these people. It's not what I wanted. And I left. And I left even though I actually loved that MSc. I loved quantum theory. I remember writing my thesis that summer on like the interpretations of quantum theory and thinking about what does it mean to be real, all of this stuff that you think about. And I loved it, and I left nonetheless. I went and got a job, learned how to code, worked in the insurance industry for 2 years. And I thought, well, I'll figure it out. And so what I did, I went and I did a part-time master's in classics and classical civilization because I'd always loved history. And I thought, by the time I finish this, I'll work out what I want to do. And I absolutely loved that MA. It was the first time I'd ever learned anything because I wanted to. It had no impact on my career. I wasn't going to go leave, and become a historian. And it was just brilliant. And I've done more since. And as I kind of went through those 2 years, I realized that I did love science. And I thought, leaving because I didn't feel I fit in, that wasn't the right reason. And I thought, well, if I want to be a scientist, then I'm just going to have to suck it up and I'm going to go back. And so I did. So what I decided that I wanted to do was to be an astronaut. A little bit because there are a couple of big astronaut-y type films that came out in the year, like Independence Day was one of them. And I thought, well, that looks cool. And so I decided I did a PhD in space physics at Imperial and did fine at it. And it's quite, one of the advantages of mathematics is that people let you do things that you knew. I hadn't done physics in 5 years at that point. And, you know, I did a reasonably mathsy bit looking at turbulence in the magnetic field. And then I went and I got a postdoc in the States. And that's kind of a standard thing, you know, like Dan was saying, it's good to move institution, it's good to move country. But I didn't get it because that's what I wanted. I went and I got that job because I'd fallen in love. And the person that I was in love with got a job at MIT. And it was kind of, do I just say goodbye to that completely and stay in the UK? Or do I try and go to the States? And I did, you know, I got a job working at Boston University, which became a fellowship. And it was a fantastic opportunity. And it was great for me. But, you know, I think sometimes we can kind of forget that careers aren't just about you and your career, you know, it's part of your life. And people do make decisions for personal reasons. They make decisions for all kinds of reasons. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to do. And I think sometimes it doesn't help to kind of separate it out completely. And so, you know, the truth is that I went to America because I was in love with someone, not because I was desperate to work in that field or in that job. And the fact that I loved that job, you know, turned out well. But that's kind of what happened. But then, you know, I did that postdoc for 3 years. And then not only did I not become an astronaut at the end of it, I left the field completely. I didn't stay a space physicist. And the prompt for that was that I'd applied to get a fellowship back in the UK at the end of it, which failed. And at the time, I was very disappointed. Looking back, I'm not surprised. I had absolutely no idea how to write a fellowship, and it just wasn't a well-written fellowship at all. And I also realized that, you know, is this actually what I wanted? And that's when I came to UCL. That's when I joined Clinical Operational Research Unit, which I now run, called CORU. And that, you know, we apply maths and healthcare. It was completely different to space physics, but it was this time a really deliberate choice. Because when I failed to get that fellowship in physics, I was like, okay, well, what is it I actually want to do? What is important to me? And part of it is thinking about what I was good at. So I knew I was good at maths. I knew I was good at collaborating. I really have always cared about healthcare. I knew I wanted to do something that had more impact. I was looking at that point at electron scattering in outer space, which was interesting. And I got to go to fantastic conferences, but I didn't love it. And it didn't matter to me. You know, I felt like I wasn't making a difference in people's lives. And I realized that is what I wanted to do. And also, to be honest, I wanted to come back to London. My then now boyfriend wanted to come back to London. And so, you know, I narrowed my choices to London. I looked at the universities, I found CORU, and I thought, actually, this is exactly what I want to do. And I managed to get a job there. And, you know, this is where I am still today. But that was entirely prompted by this failure to get a fellowship. And it did change the course of my life. And I could have stayed out in the States. I could have stayed doing what I was doing, but I decided to move. And then, you know, there's all the standard bits of being an academic, you know, the paper rejections. Yes, they happen. Sometimes they're expected, right? Sometimes you aim high and then you go down the journal ranking list. There's nothing wrong with that. It's time consuming. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes they hurt, right? A paper rejection. Often they hurt most after they've been reviewed. And that doesn't go away. But it does almost always lead to a better paper. Because if someone hasn't understood what you've done, then mostly that's because you haven't explained it well enough. And yes, sometimes they're being an arse, right? You get arsey reviewers, but then it's your challenge to then write a paper that they can't be arsey about. And that's, you know, if you kind of see it that way, you'll end up with a paper that is better and is less open to misinterpretation. But sometimes, you know, you give up on a paper and that can be okay. Like I did it last year. I've been trying to publish this piece of work that I did on a fellowship a few years ago, trying to publish it for 3 years, got rejected 5 times. I kept rewriting it and it just didn't get any traction. People just didn't get it. Sometimes I got good reviews, sometimes I didn't. And then I just thought I can't spend any more time on this. And that can be okay. So it's kind of, I think with paper rejections, that they're par for the course, and it's kind of trying to be as constructive as you can with the work that you've got and the opportunities that you have. In terms of grants, everyone has failed to get grants. So many grants, and it can be quite soul destroying. It can take months to write a good grant, and then if you don't get it, you feel like you've wasted it. For us, when I first joined CORU, it was co-funded by the Department of Health. We were just underwritten, all of our posts were underwritten for 5 years. We didn't really have to do the kind of academic project funding where you kind of apply for grants for 2-3 years at a time. But then the Department of Health changed how it was funding units like ours. And they asked us to kind of bid for something. At that point, we were quite a small unit. There were just, 2 or 3 of us, including me, relatively still junior postdoc, and my boss. And he said, well, should I write something that I know they're going to like, or should I write something that we want to do? And I said, let's write something that we want to do. Let's make it interesting. Let's do what we want to do. Let's do something exciting. Didn't work. They didn't want it. We withdrew it. We had about a year of funding that was kind of discretionary that we could use to support my post. And then it was kind of, if we don't find funding, that's it. We have to close down. And that was a stressful time. And so we applied for many grants, and we had many failures, but it's a learning process, and you can learn how to write a good grant. I have now learned, and I am now much more successful than I was. But we clawed our way through the next few years until, hopefully we're now a thriving unit. I spent quite a lot of time in global health, working there because I was really interested, in global healthcare, particularly like maternal mortality and neonatal mortality, which is still really high, particularly in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And I spent 5 years doing that. And then I stopped, and that was partly because I wasn't getting grants, or at least not the kind of grants that I wanted to work on, and partly because I could see that actually the things that I was good at didn't quite fit in kind of where global health research was going. And the kind of things that did fit, I thought were actually, well, they're more useful than what I've got to offer, and there are better people than me to do it. And so I made a conscious decision in 2012 to actually stop doing that side of my work. So sometimes I think failure can be a really good prompt to think about, have I actually failed because what I'm doing isn't the right fit, or I'm actually not the right person to be doing this? And there's nothing wrong with that at all. So I've said this again, so you do learn. I think actually, unlike papers, for grants, I think you learn more from the successes, because for failures, you rarely get feedback. But from the successes, you firstly get feedback often from a first round to a second round. But also, as you do more, you can kind of see, okay, well, what did I do well here? What did we express well? And there's always an element of chance in grants, a lot of chance. Sometimes someone's just better. Sometimes they just want something different. There are different priorities. It actually depends quite a lot on who the panel is. But I definitely think from the ones that have been successful, whether you're leading it or working on it, you actually learn a lot about how to get funding in the future. And the biggest lesson, I think, is resilience, that you have to keep going, that you can't take it personally. And the other lesson to me is, if you're going to do it properly. Because if you write a half-assed grant, it's very unlikely to get anywhere. And if you actually will spend the months it takes to build up really good collaborations, convincing collaborations, a convincing program of research, to actually think about the questions that they ask that some people leave to the last minute about impact, intellectual property, how you're going to work with the public, all of that stuff. If you do that properly, you have so much of a better chance of actually getting them to fund you. They want to know that you're taking it seriously as well. They're giving you a lot of money. So, imposter syndrome. I feel like you can't really talk about academia without talking about imposter syndrome. And of course I have it, right? Of course I do. Like, I've switched fields so many times. I did a maths degree, then I did a physics PhD and a postdoc. And then I switched to a completely different field of maths. I'm a professor of operational research. I've never done a course in operational research in my life. So I have it. But everyone, most people have it. It doesn't go away. it doesn't go away the more senior you get, because the more senior you get, the more things you're doing that you feel like you have no idea what you're doing. But I feel like it can actually be constructive. I think like imposter syndrome can make you better, because it's not bad to question yourself. I don't think, I always think, well, what can I do better? How can I improve? I think it comes with the territory of trying out new things, new fields, new ideas, new collaborations. All of it makes you think you don't really know what you're doing. And I definitely think this can be more of an issue for women as well. It doesn't mean that you're not good at it at all. So I think with imposter syndrome, you just have to accept that it will be there, and carry on. I think, that's all you can do. Sometimes I'll give a talk and I see all these people looking at me and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like, why are they here to come and listen to me of all people? And of course you think that, and you think, well, I'll just keep going. And that to me is how I deal with it. Maybe that doesn't work for everyone, but certainly I kind of feel like the world will be a better place, perhaps if a few more people had it. I can definitely think of people who I feel should have it and clearly don't. The other thing I want to talk about is kind of the uncertainty of seniority. And I know that, especially, for PhD students or early career postdocs, this might seem like a long way away, but it comes quicker than you think. And I think also sometimes, you see the people ahead of you in the career path. You look at, the associate profs, the professors, the head of department, and you think they've got it all sorted. They know everything. But that's not true, right? There's a lot of uncertainty that comes with seniority. And I think that, you have to be aware of it, partly because it might change some of the interactions that you have with your colleagues, particularly senior people in the department, but also as you move through your career, I think you need to be aware of this, like your role changes and your identity changes. And that is very subject specific. So particularly, say, in pure maths, you might go through your career and all you do is become better and better and better and more expert in this particular thing. And that is a perfectly valid and a very traditional and a very valuable academic career path. But for many people, it changes. You become more of a project manager, you run a team, you're the one that has the ideas and goes out and gets the grants, but you're no longer the person that actually does the work. You're not doing the research. And that, for me, has been quite a difficult change. Because although I like it, I like the one that gets to say what we do and what our research should be. And, I like that challenge, but at the same time, I don't do the technical stuff anymore. And so, that part of me that saw myself as a scientist, that saw myself as a tech person, the part of me that loves coding, like Dan said, I don't get to do that anymore. And I miss it, and I feel like, I've been de-skilled in that way. And I think that can be quite hard to deal with. And that, can be unsettling. In some ways, it can be quite scary, because you're like, well, if I'm not the person who's brilliant at this, then what am I? It can be maddening if suddenly you're plunged into university bureaucracy, which you're mostly spared from as a postdoc or a PhD student, and be very, very grateful for it, because it can literally drive you up the wall. And it does kind of require a complete rethink about what you want. What do you want your career to be? What do you want this next stage of your life to be part of? What kind of research do you want to do? And what kind of academic do you want to be? So, I've had to think about that over the last, 2, 3, 4 years. And originally, I wanted to be an academic who uses maths in a way that was useful, interesting. I wanted to do cool projects. I thought a lot of my projects in healthcare were really cool, looking at, intensive care, sick children, all the rest of it. But it has evolved. It's evolved, and the route it's taken is prompted both by, what I failed at, but also what I've succeeded at. I didn't think you can really separate those two things. So this is my current thoughts on being an academic. Is the first one, is thinking about there's a problem. And then, is someone already working on it? Because if there is, then maybe, I don't need to do it. But one of the things recently, in fact, pre-COVID, is I read a book, and one of the things that highlighted was about women's period pains, menstrual pain, and how it affected, you know, 80% of women at some point in their lives, 20% of women have it so badly they can't work for a few days every month. And the person writing the book said, you know what, we just accept that. People accept it, society accepts it, women accept it. There's been no new research in how to alleviate this problem in decades. And I was like, well, that's a bit shit, to be honest. So I started thinking, well, let's try and do something about it. Then, you know, I think about, does it matter? And so, you know, there's a problem, does it matter? Do I think it needs to be solved? In the matter of the period pain, I thought it did. You know, and is there something that I have to contribute to that? So what can I do to help this problem? And if sometimes the answer is nothing, and if it's nothing, then you step away or you try and highlight it to someone else. Who can I work with? So for me, this is really important. And the biggest thing that I've learned in 20 years of being an academic is that it's much, much better to work with people who are good collaborators, who are kind, who have a lot of integrity, who are good, but they don't have to be brilliant, to be honest, you know, because working with kind of the genius arsehole is painful. It's not worth it. I don't think, for me, it's not worth it. So you know, often when I find someone that I've worked really well with, I stick with them and I build up, you know, a group of people who I now work with a lot on lots of different projects, and we have a lot of success together. But also it's because we like each other, you know, and I don't think you should underestimate the importance of that. And a lot of the times I get approached by people asking me to collaborate because they like working with me. And then you have to think about who should be leading. So say for the period pain project, it was my idea, but I shouldn't be leading it. It's not my area of expertise. I've never worked in that field. The methods that it needs aren't really my methods. And so, you know, I found someone at the London School of Hygiene who's going to lead it. She's amazing. And I'm perfect, you know, and I'm very, very happy with that. You know, so I kind of think that also has to be a question. Then you think about, you know, how can we make it happen? How do we get the funding? How do we generate interest in it? How do we assemble a team? What are the timescales? Who are the relevant communities? So working in healthcare, you know, you have to think about, well, if I'm doing something that I want to have impact, who do I have to involve? You know, in this case, it's women, it's doctors, it's GPs, it's, you know, all kinds of communities that you need to involve in this if you actually want it to have a success. And I imagine that's true for many fields. If you really want to make a difference, and not everyone does, but if you do, then you have to think about who is it you need to get on board to do that. And that kind of comes about how do we create impact? Because now, as I've worked in academia for a while, you know, a lot of my early projects that I did, I loved, I was proud of, but it didn't lead anywhere. And now I want things to lead somewhere. So only a couple more slides. I was asked to join Independence Age in May. And I very, very nearly said no. It was a bit random. It was through someone I'd worked with on the global health side 10 years earlier, and he remembered me and he wanted me to join. And I thought, well, what do I have to contribute? I'm really busy. But then I thought, actually, you know what? I'll say yes, because I thought, you know, I don't want to regret anything. And if it's something I could help with, it matters to me. And since then, it's kind of taken off. I'm now in the media quite a lot. Never done it before. It has been a bit of a wild ride, but it has left me feeling uncertain again. And that's back to these kind of reasons of things that the kind of academic I want to be. But all of these questions aren't just applicable to academia. They're also applicable to life, to any kind of career choice. And now I'm thinking, well, you know, where do I want to go next in my career? What have I learned through doing IndieSage that I can take forward? How does it feed into my plans? And I had, you know, quite developed plans pre-COVID on what kind of things I wanted to do. And now it's changed, you know, everything is a bit up in the air and I don't know, you know, the answer to this is though I don't know yet. And I feel like, you know, we have to be honest about that. We have to be honest about how change can be quite rapid, how things can be uncertain, how you can feel like you've got everything sorted. And in fact, you know, you haven't. And so kind of my final thoughts are, you know, that it's okay to be uncertain, you know, embrace it. Sometimes you can't always have everything sorted out. It's okay to question what you're doing. It's okay to question why you're doing it. And it's okay to change your mind. I mean, I've changed my mind a lot in my career. You know, I've moved around. I did actually apply to be an astronaut in the end, though, actually, when the European Space Agency had an open call in 2008. But it turns out I have asthma and that disqualified me. So I didn't get to go through that proper application process. But I don't think I'd have got it anyway. But I didn't completely give up on that dream until I really was forced to. It's okay to try something new, and it's okay not to. So I've been at CORU for 15 years, right? That is far longer than I thought I would ever be at one place. But every year I've asked myself, is this where I want to be? Am I doing the work that I want to be doing? And as long as that answer is yes, then I'll stay and I won't try something new. But I feel like you have to go through that process of asking yourself that. And then in a few years ago, 4 years ago now, I did a fellowship in America for a year. And that was partly because I thought it was important at that point to try something new, to try and get out of kind of an institutional perspective, because I felt I'd been a bit institutionalized. And it was one of the most amazing years of my life. And again, you know, that was partly for my career, but partly because I wanted and my husband wanted, and we thought it would be really fun to try and spend a year abroad. Again, that was kind of partly a personal decision as well. It's okay to fail, definitely. We all do. It's perfectly okay, but it's also okay to succeed. And I think sometimes, you know, and again, this can be particularly the case for women, you know, when we fail, we tend to blame it on ourselves. And when we succeed, we say it's luck. And I think we have to be really clear that there's elements to both, right? Sometimes you fail because what you did wasn't quite good enough. A lot of it is luck. Sometimes you succeed because of luck, but also you've done the right things to get there. It's not completely chance. So I think we have to be able to accept both our role in our failures and in our successes. And then, you know, working out what you love can take years, and it changes. Like, things that I've loved have changed over the years, and you don't have to love everything. I don't have to love everything about my job to say I love my job. So you can say, right, this is such a pain, this is boring, this is tough. That's okay. As long as you love the overarching thing, as long as you love either the process or the result, or for me, you know, I love the fact that the impact, I think it's actually just genuinely interesting, the kind of work that I'm doing, especially the new stuff with Becky. And so given that, to me, like, always just try to make the next step in your career to be towards what you love doing. And in general, I think you need more of a reason to say no to something than you do to say yes to something. Don't say no just because you can't quite be bothered, or you have to think about it, or you're a bit scared. And never say no to something because you think you can't do it. And that's where I will end.